Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today we've got yet another 3D printer review. This time we're looking at the brand new JGMaker Magic from JGAurora. Let's go. Now, I bought my first commercial 3D printer way back in 2015 for around $1,000 US. At the time it seemed like a fair price, but today you can get good printers for well under $500 US. Today we're looking at a printer that's even cheaper than that at $250 US. My question today is it any good, and what do you get when you spend such little money? Is it a printer I could possibly recommend? Let's take a look at the JGMaker Magic. Now, if you're getting started with 3D printing, you might feel a little bit overwhelmed with the incredible number of printers out there available. Now, I love the fact that we keep seeing better and better printers be released at lower and lower prices, and it's letting more and more people get involved in this hobby. I can understand that many people want to start out with a budget model, just as a way to dip their toes in the water without sinking a lot of money on a hobby they're not sure if they're going to enjoy or not. However, this becomes a challenge for manufacturers. How can you make a printer of better quality than the one you made last year and sell it for a lower price and yet still make a profit? Some manufacturers take this challenge and they solve it by removing features and making a simpler, more stripped down printer. Perhaps it's smaller, perhaps it has no heated bed, while others cut down the quality of the parts themselves, which can have a negative effect on the experience of the customer. This can make buying a budget printer a little bit of a minefield. There's a risk of getting a printer for what seems like a bargain price, only to find out that it breaks down frequently or it produces terrible quality 3D prints. I've seen bad experiences put people off 3D printing completely. That's a really sad outcome. The goal of this review is to shine a light on the JGMaker Magic to give you a look behind the curtain to see if the JGMaker knows any good tricks, or if it's all just an illusion. So I received this printer from Gearbest way back in early January. I've been using it on and off since then. I think I've given it a fair go at this point. This new budget model has been designed to compete with some of the popular budget models like the Ender 3 or the Alpha Wise U30. In this review, I hope to show you both what is good about this printer and also to show you the points at which they seem to have cut corners to achieve the aggressive price point. Now onto the unboxing. Once you open the main box, you'll find the printer securely packaged in foam, with all the main parts and components neatly arranged in individually labelled plastic bags. There's only a dozen or so components to attach to the main frame, and the assembly is not difficult. The manual's not quite as clear as some of the manuals I've seen, and it's only included as a digital copy on the included SD card. Apart from the SD card, the only other accessories the printer comes with are a USB card reader, a USB cable, a spare nozzle, a couple of hex keys, and a wrench for removing or changing the nozzle, and finally a very, very short length of filament. I was able to print the very small basic calibration object on the included SD card with the filament, but that was it. You're really going to need to buy some filament when you get this printer, and you probably want to get a few other accessories as well. So I'll put a link in the description of some suggested items you might want to check out. Now, I've had to put together a few printers over my time, but even so, I still had to refer to the manual, just to ensure I was getting some of the parts the right way around, so just double check that as you go through. Now, the manual's not quite as good as some of the others I've seen. The Alpha Wise U20 came with a full color printed manual, however the JGMaker Magic only comes with a digital manual included in black and white on the SD card. So this is an area that really could be improved, as it makes the assembly process much easier than having to go and grab a laptop and look up and print out the manual if necessary. After assembling the printer, I tried a few test prints. Amazingly enough, they all came out pretty well first time. I had no major issues. While this seems like something you probably should expect, it actually unfortunately doesn't always happen. So this was a good start to see those test prints come out without too much hassle. Now, it took me 90 minutes from opening the box to getting my first print started, but that was me with me mucking around and checking every part and inspecting things and taking parts off and putting them back on. I think if you are more focused and if you follow the manual, you'll easily get it done in under half an hour, and I wouldn't be surprised if people get it done in less than 15 minutes. Some of the ads say 10 minutes, I'd say probably a little bit more than that. 15 minutes, 20 minutes, you should be up and running. After finishing the assembly, I found that I had 2 or 3 screws left over. I'm sure you'll be aware this is quite disconcerting, but just letting you know, I followed the instructions and I still had some screws left over, so I hope those were just spares. Now, plugging in the printer, I had my first surprise. The main print head has a fan on it Now that fan was faulty in my printer. It span fine and it would blow air well, but it was extremely noisy. I initially tried to oil that fan, didn't resolve the issue. So I contacted JGAurora and they sent me a brand new replacement fan in about 2.5 weeks. That replacement fan was significantly quieter and I've been happy with that since then. Now, looking at the design of the printer, JGAurora has a main strength in printers made with sheet metal frames. They've invested in having high quality sheet metal fabrication facilities several years ago, and it shows in the quality of the construction of all of their printers. This gives the printer quite a nice, clean, refined appearance compared to some of the other budget printers out there that can look a bit bare. The main control unit is integrated into the main chassis of the printer, and this helps to keep the printer's footprint down and make the best use of space. Looking at the top half of the printer, there's actually very little to distinguish it from some of the other printers out there like the Ender 3 or AlphaWise U30, as it's made with the same style of aluminium extrusions. In fact, the overall appearance of the machine is quite similar to that of the Getek A20, which actually retails for a significantly higher price. Now, the Z-axis and the X-axis both ride along the extrusions on solid rubber wheels. This is actually not a rubber but a plastic called POM or Delrin. It's a very rigid plastic and it does well under compression. This is a very cheap way to make a linear motion system. I'm not saying it's a bad system, it does seem to work reasonably well, but it is very cheap to do so. These wheels roll along V-slot grooves in the aluminium extrusions, and that helps to keep the printer aligned while printing. One thing that is important to do is to actually inspect the wheels thoroughly. If there are dents or large chips out of those wheels, that will affect how smooth the motion of the printer is, and that will then affect the quality of the prints you get. So make sure you check your wheels when you get your printer, and definitely ask for replacements if you find that they are unacceptably damaged. Some of the rollers on my printer were probably a little bit more dinted than I would have liked, however I haven't yet seen any detriment to the print quality. Looking at the Z-axis on the printer, the Z-axis supports the entire X-axis and extruder motor, but it only has a single lead screw on the right side of the printer. Now this is alright, we've seen the design work well on other printers, but frankly I really don't like it. I'd much rather see lead screws on both sides so that this X gantry is fully supported. The extruder on this printer uses a Bowden system where the extruder motor is mounted separately and the filament is pushed down a tube into the hot end. By having the extruder mounted separately, that makes the mass of the moving print head significantly lighter, and this can result in better quality printing at high speeds. However, if this filament tube is too long, you start to get side effects such as filament oozing or having to do significant compensation such as large retraction values. I'm happy to report that this is actually a really nice and short Bowden system, and it translates to really good print results. I saw very minimal stringing and oozing, and I would say it's actually a slightly better quality print result than I saw in the JGAurora A5S and A1 printer, and definitely miles ahead of that of the A5, which comes with the excessively long Bowden tube from the factory. Looking at the print head, there is a nice, tidy and enclosed hot end. My favourite feature is this detachable cable on top, as it allows you to replace the cable if it becomes damaged, or allows you to detach the hot end from the printer and maintain or service it without having to take all the cables off the printer as well. This is a really big plus in my opinion, and I think it'll make some maintenance jobs significantly easier. I really wish that all printers had detachable cables on their print head. Moving our attention down to the print bed rides on polished rods on bearings, and the motion of the bed is quite smooth. The bed is well supported with a steel frame and there's no wobble or loose parts, which I have seen in some other printers. The bearings on the Magix bed seem to be really great, which is good news because the JGAurora A5S I reviewed last year came with some really terrible quality bearings. So it looks like they've found the issue and they've found a better supplier, because the bed on this printer moves really nicely and smoothly. In order to get your prints to stick, the heated print bed on the Magix is fitted with a PVC sticker, just the same as the AlphaWise U30 and the Ender 3. Yes, it's quite easy to get your prints to stick, about 45 degrees or less even, and your PLA will stick with no problems. The problem can be though, if you're printing at a too thin a layer height, or if you're printing too hot, getting those prints off the bed at the end can be a real challenge. Fortunately on this printer, the top surface can be removed from the heater surface, as well as being flexible so you can take your print off, flex the build plate, and your parts are fairly easy to remove. Now, while it might be a reasonably good and its low cost solution, the PVC sticker I think is an inferior bed surface to print on compared to the coated glass ceramic surfaces we've seen in some other printers. JGAurora calls their coating the Black Diamond, Anycubic calls it Ultra Base, and G-Tech calls theirs the Super Plate. Whatever you call it, this glass frit coating I think works better. Parts will stick at about 60 degrees, but once they cool down, the parts will practically pop off, and this makes removing parts much easier compared to working with the PVC stickers. If you've seen Dahai's review, you'll know what's coming. Right now, as of March 2019, if you search for JGMaker Magic, some of the advertisements are indicating this printer comes with a magnetic bed. This is not the case. I've confirmed this with the manufacturer. This bed is held on with bulldog clips. And because of this change in design, they have also had to change the design of the heater elements underneath the printer. With the old print surface that was magnetically attached, the heater would go right to the edges of the bed. Putting bulldog clips on, the bulldog clips ran the risk of cutting into the heater elements and causing a short circuit. So JGAurora has had to revise the design of the heater bed to fix that issue. And I've been told that all the new retail printers will be coming with the correct revised heater bed, so this should not be an issue. It's a bit sad because we actually saw this exact same issue on the JGAurora A5 with the same issue of the bed clips cutting into the heater. So hopefully this time they've learned their lesson for good. Now, even though JGAurora decided not to use a magnetic bed, there are actually some third-party upgrades you can do to add that to your printer. I did a review of a really low-cost magnetic bed solution if you look at my channel, and there are also more expensive options out there as well. The low-cost options tend to only be safe to use up to about 75 degrees Celsius. Above that, they do start to lose their magnetism, while the higher end magnetic bed solutions will work and maintain their magnetism all the way up through the heating range. One thing I'd like to comment on is actually the size of this printer. Compared to the 300mm cube that can be printed on the JGAurora A5S, the print volume of the Magic might seem to be small. However, in reality, I would estimate that over 95%, maybe even 99% of the prints that I do would easily fit on the standard JGMaker bed. The JGMaker bed is actually far from small. The print volume of this printer is about 7 times that of something like the Up Mini, which is used in many high schools, and it's still enough for many common prints. Now, being a smaller printer might seem like a downside, but it actually brings out several other advantages. The smaller printed bed on the JGMaker Magic means that it heats up faster. It means it requires a smaller power supply, so it's more energy efficient. It means it weighs less, so the bed can be moved faster without inducing large vibrations in the frame. And also, having a smaller frame overall that's still made of a stiff material means the entire frame is rock solid. I'm very impressed with the build quality of the JGMaker Magic. So definitely, unless you're planning on doing full-size cosplay helmets, don't be put off by the slightly smaller size of the JGMaker Magic. Feature-wise, the JGMaker Magic distinguishes itself from the competition through the addition of a few fail-safe features. One of those is the power outage resume. So if the power goes out during printing, as long as the print doesn't cool down completely, you can resume the print once the power comes back online. The other feature is the filament runout detection. If the filament runs out, there's a switch that's triggered, the printer will pause and give you the opportunity to change the roll and resume the print without having to abandon halfway through a print. Now, these features do work, however they don't work perfectly yet. I think they need a bit of firmware tuning, and you may see there's zits or blobs left on the model at the point where the filament is paused and resumed. Now, the electronics on the Magic are on the underside of the main frame. This semi-open design is quite nice from a maintenance perspective. The dangerous AC mains voltage are nicely hidden behind some sheet metal, although there are some finger gaps that I think could be made a little bit smaller to make the printer design safer. Now, the main power supply in the JGMaker Magic was a generic 250 watt switched mode power supply that operates at 24 volts. It was good to see that it was able to heat up quite quickly, reaching 60 degrees on the bed in under 3 minutes and able to reach 110 degrees on the bed for ABS printing within about 12 minutes. The nozzle was able to heat up to about 210 degrees Celsius in about 3 minutes. So overall, preheating on the JGMaker Magic is quite fast, and that's a nice thing to see. Now, the JGMaker Magic runs on a proprietary motherboard designed in-house by JGAurora. From what I can see, it seems properly designed and well laid out. The stepper drivers are HR4982. These are made by a Chinese company called Heroic Technology, hope I'm pronouncing that right, and they should not be confused with those of the Allegro A4988. From what I can see, they perform reasonably well. They aren't really significantly quieter, but they don't seem to suffer from the salmon skinning that we do see with the Allegro drivers, which is really nice to see. Unfortunately, the stepper drivers are soldered to the main motherboard, and this means if a stepper driver channel fails, you actually have to replace the whole motherboard versus just being able to swap out one driver. It also means that upgrading the stepper drivers is not possible to something that's completely silent like the TMCs. There is no active cooling over the motherboard, but there is at least a heatsink on the underside of the board. There is no tuning potentiometers, so there's no way to tune the power being given to each stepper driver. While the motherboard is completely adequate for this printer, what it lacks is any kind of expandability. Even though it uses the same CPU as some of the other motherboards out there, none of the additional spare unused pins are made accessible, which means that adding features like a BL Touch or an auto bed leveling sensor becomes a lot more difficult. Other printers like the G-Tech A20 offer much easier upgrades. They actually sell their own automatic bed leveling kits. The printer comes from factory with mounting points and spare ports, and it makes adding those extra features a doddle. The printer runs on the Marlin open source firmware and appears to be a reasonably up-to-date version from around mid-2018. Now, one of the rules about using Marlin firmware as an open source product in your product is that you have to provide the source code to your customers. Unfortunately, JGAurora has not complied with the GPL, and they are not, at present, March 2019, they have not yet released their source code for their printer. I have been told they will do so, but I have not been given any timeline, so it remains to be seen if that'll happen or not. This is quite disappointing, as I've been pursuing them to comply with the GPL for several years, and they did release the source code for the A5 and the A5S printers, so I am hopeful, but we just have to wait and see. Now, an area that's often overlooked is cable management on the printer. Now, I already mentioned the detachable cable for the hot end, which I really like, but unfortunately the cabling on the rest of the printer leaves a bit to be desired. There seems to be very little thought that's been put into managing cables neatly on the JGMaker Magic. I've spent quite a lot of time with cable ties trying to do my best, and I'm still not happy with the ways the cables move and behave on this printer. At times I'm really worried that the extruder hot end cable will catch on a print, and the cable for the bed at times rubs up against the Z-axis lead screw, which doesn't really leave me very impressed. It doesn't add much to the cost of the printer to add a few mounting points here and there. It just requires a little bit more thought during the design phase, and this is something that I wish they had done better on the JGMaker Magic. Now looking at print quality, I've been using the JGMaker Magic for quite a few prints, and so far I've been really happy with the print quality. The surface of the prints is very smooth, the layers are consistently and accurately placed, and there is very minimal stringing or oozing. In summary, there's really not a lot that I can see that could be improved, but there is one thing that I noticed. So I've been printing a whole lot of tolerance tests to try to test the accuracy of this printer. What these are, they print two objects side by side with a controlled gap between them, and we try to identify the smallest gap that can be printed without having those parts fused together accidentally. That's what these tolerance tests check for. There's a range of different gap sizes, and we see which of them move freely and which of them are fused. Out of the box, the best I could do was a 0.5 millimeters, which is quite a poor result. These printers should be able to print much more accurately than that. Watching the reviews from Dahai and discussions from others, they had identified that the Z-axis lead screw motor seemed to be quite spongy, and this was causing the first few layers to be smushed outwards, fusing together and causing bad tolerance tests. Now, I replaced the Z-axis motor on my printer and it did help the results. However, I still had some what they call elephant footing, where at the bed surface there is some broadening of the print, tapering down and swelling. And I was thinking, well, where else could this be coming from? It definitely wasn't the Z-axis lead screw motor anymore. So I kept inspecting the printer and I think I found out the cause. The main X-axis print arm is only raised at one side by a lead screw. The other side is unsupported and simply rides on these rollers on the main frame. What I was noticing was when the Z-axis was moving up, the X-axis would pivot on the left side and become cantilevered before start moving up. And when moving down, it would also tilt down first before moving down. And I think this hysteresis was what was causing my elephant footing on my prints. What I think I identified was an issue with the roller bearing system. Now these roller bearings are supposed to ride along the frame. They're supposed to be precisely manufactured so they can grip onto the frame tightly without being able to wobble. But in this case here, my roller bearings, one of them was able to spin freely. It wasn't making contact with the main frame. This tells me that this tolerance on this roller is not accurately matched to the dimensions of the aluminum extrusions. On most printers that use this system, they compensate for that by using what they call eccentric nuts. The nuts that bond the plate to the bearing wheel have an offset shaft that can be adjusted with a hex wrench. By adjusting this, they can actually have the grip of the rollers be adjustable and precisely calibrated to give a nice firm grip of these on the main roller shafts. On the JGAurora Maker Magic, these are just solid shafts. There is no adjustment available, so I can't adjust the tension of these wheels on the frame. I've since ordered some parts from eBay to try to attempt this, but in the meantime what I did was I took this part off completely. The results I saw were pretty clear. Immediately I had no more issues with elephant footing. The arm would stay level, there was no more hysteresis and wobbling. I was able to print small tolerance tests all the way down to 0.15 millimeters. I still have more tuning to do, so don't take that result as perfect, but they were significantly better than with these guide rollers attached. So what does this hack mean? Have I compromised the integrity of the printer? Far from it. There are actually several printers out there on the market that use this exact design. One single vertical upright, one lead screw, and this sort of cantilevered arm, and those printers print quite well. But this roller should in theory give more stability to the x-axis, so it is degrading the printer somewhat. I'm going to give my feedback to JGAurora about this modification. They are known for making improvements and changes to their product over time, so hopefully this is something that they can fix. In the meantime, however, this hack seems to have had no ill effects, and I'm still very happy with the print quality. To summarize, now there's nothing on this printer that is absolutely wrong. It's all round a decent design. The frame is really nice and stiff, and there's nothing major that I can fault. However, the use of a single lead screw, the lack of eccentric nuts, and the poor cable management are all areas that take this printer from being an easy recommendation for any beginner to something that makes me say it's good, but... So you can hear my disappointment in those areas. I'm also disappointed that JGAurora has not released the source code for the main Marlin firmware. However, looking at the motherboard, I now see that there actually is very limited options for upgrades or modifications because of that very basic motherboard. As a beginner to try out 3D printing, I think this is not an important issue, but it's something you should be aware of, especially if you're looking for a platform that you want to build on for the future. In that case, it might be worth spending a bit more money to get something that has more upgrade possibilities. Alternatively, rather than worrying about upgrading a printer down the track, you could just simply use this printer as a wonderful tool, have lots of fun with it, and then use it to help you build your next 3D printer when you're ready to outgrow this one. Now overall, the value offered by the JGMaker Magic is really quite undeniable. The print quality is fantastic, and from what I've seen, the extruder is one of the more reliable systems that I've actually used. The nice short bodum helps to reduce stringing and oozing, and I had no trouble printing at fast speeds. Even though the documentation is fairly sparse, I think it's an easy enough printer that most beginners will not have any major hassles. From what I've seen, JGAurora's customer support has also been quite reliable over the last year, so I think that even if you do have problems like I had problems with my fan, I think you'll be well taken care of. Compared to the competition like the Ender 3 or the AlphaWise U30, I think the print quality is better out of the box than those printers, and the addition of the power added resume and the filament runout detection give this printer an advantage over the Ender 3 in particular. Well, that's the end of my review. I hope you find that helpful in considering your next 3D printer to buy. If you do have comments or questions about this printer, or feedback about how I do my reviews, feel free to leave those in the comments below. I'm always happy to listen. Finally, a big thank you to Gearbest for sending me this printer for review. Without them, these reviews would not be possible. I could definitely recommend Gearbest. I've bought lots of electronics from them over the last couple of years. I would recommend when buying a 3D printer, wherever you buy it from, do take up the option for shipping insurance. These are big printers, and global shipping parcel distributors are far from gentle. Lastly, there's one more thing I wanted to talk about. I'm pretty excited that I recently hit 1,000 subscribers. A little exciting milestone. So I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of you who have joined me on this journey so far. Your vote of confidence encourages me to keep on doing what I do, and I'm really grateful for all your support. Thank you for your time and happy printing.